Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're stepping into a story that isn't really about trains, snow, or even Christmas itself. It's about belief, the quiet kind that fades as we grow up, and the brave kind that refuses to disappear. The Polar Express is one of those rare films that feels different depending on how old you are when you watch it. As a child, it feels magical. As an adult, it feels nostalgic, almost bittersweet. Released in 2004, The Polar Express arrived during a time when animation was changing fast. But beyond its technology, what made this film endure was its emotional core. A simple journey that asks a powerful question. What happens when belief is tested? Tonight, we're not just revisiting a Christmas movie. We're revisiting a moment in life where wonder still mattered. The story begins on a cold Christmas Eve, in a quiet American town buried under winter silence. Snow rests gently on rooftops, streetlights glow softly, and everything feels paused, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Inside one house, a young boy lies awake in bed, staring into the darkness. He listens. He waits. But what he doesn't hear troubles him deeply. No bells, no sleigh, no proof. This boy is at an age where belief is no longer automatic. The world has started asking questions, and worse, demanding evidence. Adults talk. Teachers explain. Logic creeps in. And suddenly, something that once felt certain begins to feel embarrassing to admit. The boy wants to believe in Santa Claus, but doubt has quietly taken root. As midnight approaches, the silence outside breaks in the most unexpected way. A low rumble shakes the ground. Metal groans. Steam hisses. The sound doesn't belong to the night, and yet it's unmistakably real. When the boy looks outside, he sees something impossible standing in front of his house. A massive train, glowing warmly against the snow. Alive in a way no ordinary machine should be. This isn't a dream. It's an invitation. A tall, authoritative conductor steps forward, calm and confident, as if this moment has been scheduled long in advance. He doesn't explain much. He doesn't need to. The destination is simple: the North Pole. The purpose is unspoken but clear. This journey is not for everyone. At first, the boy hesitates. Doubt doesn't disappear easily. But as the train begins to move, something inside him reacts faster than logic. Fear mixes with curiosity. And in that instant he makes a choice. The kind that quietly shapes who we become later in life. He boards the train. Inside, the world changes immediately. The car is filled with children, strangers, yet somehow familiar. Each of them carries their own version of belief. Some are confident, loud, unquestioning. Others are quiet, withdrawn, unsure whether they belong here at all. Among them is a girl whose energy fills the space effortlessly, and a boy who believes knowledge alone makes him superior. These personalities aren't random. They represent different ways children protect their beliefs. As the train moves forward, it stops to pick up another child. This boy is different, lonely, hesitant. The kind of child who has learned disappointment early. When he finally boards, he chooses isolation over connection, sitting alone in the back of the train. It's a quiet decision, but one that matters deeply later. The journey begins smoothly, but belief is rarely stable. Small moments test the passengers almost immediately. Rules are enforced. Authority is challenged. Curiosity leads to consequences. When the main boy pulls an emergency brake to help the lonely child, he learns that good intentions still carry responsibility. Belief, the film suggests, isn't passive. It requires action, and sometimes courage. Soon, warmth fills the train, as the children are served hot chocolate, a moment of comfort and celebration. But even here, belief is fragile. A simple ticket becomes symbolic. It represents acceptance, validation, and the idea that belief must be acknowledged to survive. When the ticket is lost, the boy chases it not just through train cars, but through uncertainty itself. His journey across the roof of the train is dangerous, cold, and surreal. The world outside feels unreal, a place where logic bends and imagination reigns. It's here that the boy encounters something strange. A figure who doesn't quite belong to the living world. This ghostly presence doesn't force belief. Instead, it challenges it, reminding us that belief can be playful, frightening, and deeply personal all at once. When the boy reaches the front of the train, chaos meets control. Things are breaking. Speed increases. Danger becomes real. And suddenly, belief isn't about Santa anymore. It's about trust. Trust in others. Trust in yourself. Trust that even when things feel out of control, there's a way forward. The train hurtles across ice, balance hanging by a thread. In these moments, the story makes its point clear. Belief isn't blind. It's a decision made under pressure. And when the boy helps restore control, he earns something important. Not praise, but validation. The ticket is finally punched. And with that small metallic sound, belief becomes official. The North Pole is closer now. The night on the train deepens as the Polar Express keeps moving forward, cutting through forests and frozen valleys that seem endless. Inside the passenger car, the warmth contrasts sharply with the icy world outside, and the sound of wheels on tracks creates a steady rhythm that feels almost hypnotic. The boy sits quietly, still processing everything he has already seen. He glances around at the other children, each of them reacting differently to the strange journey. Some are laughing, some are nervous, and some stare out the windows with wide-eyed wonder. The spirited girl continues to ask questions and speak her mind without hesitation, while the know-it-all boy confidently explains rules and facts as if he owns the train itself. Yet beneath all of this noise and excitement, there is a shared feeling that something important is unfolding. Something that will change them all in ways they cannot yet understand. The hot chocolate scene becomes one of those moments that feels larger than life. The servers enter with synchronized movements, carrying trays stacked high with steaming mugs, their voices blending into a playful song that fills the car. The chocolate is rich and sweet, almost magical in how comforting it feels. For a brief time, worries disappear, replaced by laughter and the simple joy of sharing something warm on a cold night. It is during this moment that the girl leaves her seat, heading toward the lonely boy in the observation car. She carries a mug of hot chocolate for him, determined not to let him feel forgotten. When she stands up, her ticket slips from her pocket, unnoticed at first, and that small accident quietly sets another chain of events into motion. The boy notices the ticket lying on the seat and picks it up, intending to return it. Before he can, a sudden rush of wind pulls it from his hands, sending it flying out through a gap between the cars. The camera follows the ticket as it glides through the cold night, drifting over snow-covered landscapes and dark forests. It feels almost symbolic, as if belief itself is being tested, slipping away into the unknown. Determined not to let it disappear, the boy leaves the safety of the passenger car and ventures outside. Climbing onto the roof of the train, the cold air hits him immediately, sharp and unforgiving, and every step feels dangerous as the train speeds forward. Out on the roof, the boy encounters the mysterious hobo, a ghostly figure who seems to exist between reality and imagination. The hobo speaks in riddles, offering cryptic advice about listening to the train and trusting the journey. He claims to be the king of the Polar Express and the North Pole, a statement that sounds ridiculous at first but somehow feels true in this strange world. The hobo's presence adds an eerie layer to the story, suggesting that this journey is not just physical but also deeply personal, a test of courage and belief. With the hobo's guidance, the boy makes his way toward the engine, clinging tightly as the train roars beneath him. Inside the engine, chaos unfolds. The girl is temporarily driving the train while the engineer and firemen work to fix a broken headlamp. Sparks fly, alarms sound, and the sense of danger increases as the train races toward a herd of caribou crossing the tracks. The near collision raises the tension to a peak, forcing everyone to act quickly. When a loose cotter pin causes the throttle to malfunction, the train begins to speed uncontrollably, launching onto tracks that twist and dip like a roller coaster. The scene is thrilling and frightening at the same time, capturing the feeling of being completely out of control while still moving forward. The train eventually slides onto a frozen lake, the ice cracking beneath its weight. The sound of splitting ice echoes around them, a reminder that one wrong move could send everything sinking into the freezing water. In a moment of ingenuity, the boy uses a simple hairpin to secure the loose pin, restoring control just in time. As the train escapes the breaking ice, relief washes over everyone. The danger has passed, at least for now, and the boy finally manages to return the girl's ticket. The conductor punches it with a firm click, validating not just the ticket but the girl's place on the journey. When the Polar Express finally arrives at the North Pole, the sight is overwhelming. Lights glow in every direction, elves rush about with purpose, and towering buildings stretch into the snowy night. The air is filled with excitement and anticipation. The conductor announces that one child will be chosen to receive the first gift of Christmas from Santa himself. The children gather, their faces lit with hope and wonder. It is in this moment that the boy and the girl notice Billy still sitting alone, separated from the celebration. They approach him gently, listening as he explains how Christmas has never worked out for him, how disappointment has become something he expects rather than fears. Determined not to leave him behind, they convince Billy to join them. Yet even here, challenges arise. Because of a small mistake, one of the cars becomes uncoupled, rolling away toward Santa's workshop. The children find themselves navigating a maze of buildings filled with elves, conveyor belts, and mountains of presents. The world feels alive and busy, every detail reinforcing the magic of the place. They stumble upon a gift addressed to Billy, a moment that feels deeply personal, as if the North Pole itself knows his heart. The journey leads them into Santa's sack, an unexpected and humorous twist that brings them face to face with the reality of Santa's work. When Santa finally arrives, the atmosphere shifts. His presence is calm and powerful, radiating warmth and kindness. During the celebration, a bell falls from the reins of his reindeer, landing at the boy's feet. At first, the boy cannot hear it ring. The silence is unsettling, forcing him to confront his own doubts. Then, as he focuses and chooses to believe, the sound comes through, clear and bright. A simple chime that carries enormous meaning. Santa selects the boy to receive the first gift of Christmas, allowing him to keep the bell. The gesture feels symbolic, a reward not for bravery or intelligence, but for belief. As the train begins its journey home, the mood is reflective. The children are quieter now, each lost in their own thoughts. When the boy discovers that he has lost the bell through a hole in his pocket, it feels like a cruel twist of fate, a reminder of how fragile belief can be. On Christmas morning, the boy finds the bell wrapped neatly with a note from Santa. When he rings it, the sound is clear and joyful, but his parents cannot hear it. The realization is bittersweet. Belief, once lost, is hard to regain. As time passes, even his sister eventually stops hearing the bell. Yet for him, the sound remains. It stays with him into adulthood, a reminder of that extraordinary night when he chose to believe, and of the simple truth that the magic of Christmas lives on for those who hold on to faith in something greater than themselves. The train kept moving through the frozen wilderness, its wheels humming steadily against the steel tracks, as if they were carrying not just children, but expectations, doubts, and fragile hopes. Inside the passenger car, the boy sat quietly, staring out the window at endless snow-covered forests flashing by under the pale moonlight. He clutched the armrest, his thoughts racing faster than the train itself. Every shake of the carriage felt unreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any second. Across from him, the girl with the strong voice and fearless eyes leaned forward, curious and excited, completely convinced that this journey was real. She talked eagerly about the North Pole, about Santa, about the magic that waited at the end of the tracks, while the boy listened, unsure whether to believe her or not. As the train continued deeper into the night, the conductor passed through the aisle, checking tickets with firm precision. His presence carried authority, but also something warm and reassuring, as if he had done this journey 1,000 times before. When he punched each ticket, the sound echoed sharply, almost ceremonial, reminding the children that every passenger belonged on this train for a reason. The boy watched carefully, wondering what his own ticket meant, and whether belief itself could truly be measured or validated by a simple hole punched in paper. Suddenly, the calm rhythm of the ride was interrupted when the train slowed down and eventually stopped in the middle of nowhere. Confused murmurs spread through the passenger car. The conductor announced they were picking up another child. Moments later, the doors opened to reveal a lonely boy standing in the snow, hesitant and uncertain. His clothes looked worn, and his eyes reflected years of quiet disappointment. He refused to board at first, shaking his head nervously, as if afraid to hope. The train began to move again, but the main boy, sensing something wrong, pulled the emergency brake without thinking. The conductor rushed in, furious about the delay. Yet the boy stood his ground, believing deeply that no one should be left behind. Eventually, the lonely boy managed to jump aboard, though he chose to sit alone in the rear observation car, separated from the others by both distance and invisible walls of self-doubt. Back in the main car, the atmosphere shifted as uniformed waiters suddenly appeared, balancing trays of steaming mugs. The sound of music filled the air as hot chocolate was served in a lively, almost theatrical performance. The children laughed, clapped, and sang along, their worries temporarily forgotten. The boy accepted his cup, feeling the warmth spread through his hands and chest. It reminded him of home, of comfort, of moments when believing felt easy. Amid the excitement, he noticed the girl had left her seat, following the conductor toward the back of the train to deliver a cup to the lonely boy. In her rush, she dropped her ticket without realizing it. The boy picked up the ticket, recognizing its importance immediately. It felt wrong to leave it behind. Without thinking too much, he decided to return it to her. As he moved between cars, the train jolted suddenly, and the ticket was ripped from his fingers by a powerful gust of wind. He watched helplessly as it flew out into the dark wilderness, tumbling through the air before disappearing entirely. Panic set in. He knew the conductor took tickets seriously, and without it, the girl could be thrown off the train. Determined to fix his mistake, the boy began a dangerous journey across the tops of the train cars, battling icy winds and slippery metal beneath his feet. During his climb, he encountered a strange figure, a ghostly hobo, who seemed to appear out of nowhere. The man spoke in riddles, claiming to know the secrets of the train and the North Pole itself. Though unsettling, he offered guidance, helping the boy reach the engine safely. There, the boy found the girl astonishingly driving the train, while the engineer and fireman struggled to repair a broken headlamp. The situation quickly spiraled into chaos when the train sped uncontrollably across a frozen lake, its surface cracking beneath the immense weight. With quick thinking and cooperation, they managed to fix the problem just in time, narrowly escaping disaster. In the aftermath, the boy finally returned the ticket to the girl, who smiled with relief as the conductor punched it, officially validating her place on the journey. Eventually, towering lights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as the train slowed. The North Pole came into view, glowing with warmth and wonder against the cold darkness. Massive workshops, endless rows of elves, and towering Christmas trees filled the landscape. The children stepped off the train in awe, surrounded by music, laughter, and the unmistakable energy of belief made real. The conductor announced that one child would be chosen to receive the first gift of Christmas directly from Santa himself. A moment that made every heart beat faster. As the children waited, the boy noticed the lonely child still sitting apart, unsure whether he truly belonged. Remembering his own doubts, the boy and the girl approached him, gently encouraging him to join the celebration. Slowly, the lonely boy opened up, admitting that Christmas had never worked out for him before. He had learned to expect disappointment rather than joy. The boy understood this feeling all too well and reassured him that sometimes believing was the hardest part, but also the most important. Through a series of mishaps, the children found themselves separated from the main crowd, wandering through Santa's workshop. Conveyor belts carried toys in every direction, elves rushed back and forth, and magic filled the air in ways that defied explanation. At one point, they discovered a wrapped gift, labeled with the lonely boy's name, a quiet promise that he had not been forgotten after all. Eventually, they were swept into Santa's massive gift sack, a moment that felt absurd and magical all at once. When Santa finally arrived, the world seemed to pause. His presence carried an undeniable sense of warmth and authority, yet kindness shone through every word he spoke. As reindeer prepared for flight, a small bell fell loose from their harness, landing at the boy's feet. At first, he couldn't hear its sound, even as others around him reacted. Confused and disappointed, he hesitated, until Santa gently reminded him that hearing the bell required true belief. In that moment, something shifted inside the boy. He held on to the idea that brought him on this journey in the first place, and suddenly, the bell rang clear and beautiful in his ears. Santa chose the boy to receive the first gift of Christmas, allowing him to keep the bell as a reminder of what belief could unlock. As the sleigh lifted into the sky, cheers erupted, and the magic of the night felt complete. The train soon began its return journey, dropping each child back at their home. When the boy discovered the bell was missing, his heart sank, but on Christmas morning, he found it waiting for him under the tree, accompanied by a note from Santa himself. Years later, the boy would remember that sound clearly, even as others lost the ability to hear it. The bell continued to ring for him, a lasting symbol of faith, wonder, and the quiet power of choosing to believe, no matter how old he became. The train glided back through the sleeping towns and silent countryside, its whistle echoing softly into the early hours of Christmas morning. As the boy lay in his bed later that night, the warmth of the journey still lingered in his chest, as if the magic of the North Pole had followed him home. When dawn finally arrived, pale winter light filled his room, and the quiet excitement of Christmas morning settled over the house. He noticed a small box tucked carefully beneath the tree, wrapped simply, waiting as if it had always belonged there. His heart skipped when he opened it and found the silver bell resting inside, shining gently. Along with it was a note written in familiar handwriting, reminding him that true belief never fades as long as it is protected. He shook the bell softly, and its clear, delicate sound filled the room, unmistakable and beautiful. His younger sister rushed in, her eyes wide with joy as she heard it too, while their parents smiled politely, unable to hear anything at all. In that quiet moment, the boy understood that belief was something deeply personal, something that lived inside, rather than in the world around him. As the years passed, memories of that night became stories he carried with him, even as time tried to dull their edges. He grew older, taller, and more aware of how easily people let go of wonder. Friends he once shared secrets with slowly stopped hearing the bell, brushing it off as imagination or childish fantasy. Each time that happened, the boy felt a small sadness, but also a stronger resolve to hold on. He learned that believing was not about ignoring reality, but about choosing hope when doubt felt easier. The bell remained with him through every stage of life, hidden safely yet never forgotten, a quiet reminder of who he had been and who he still was beneath the weight of growing up. In his mind, the journey on the train replayed itself again and again. He remembered the rhythm of the wheels, the laughter of the children, and the conductor's steady voice guiding them forward. The faces of the girl, the lonely boy, and even the know-it-all child remained vivid, each representing a different way of seeing the world. He often wondered what paths their lives had taken, whether they too had managed to hold on to belief, or if it had slipped away somewhere along the road. Sometimes, when winter nights grew especially quiet, he imagined the Polar Express still running, its lights cutting through snowstorms, carrying new children toward a place where belief was not questioned but celebrated. As an adult, the boy faced moments that tested him in ways far different from childhood fears. Responsibilities, disappointments, and loss entered his life, each threatening to silence the sound of the bell. Yet every time doubt crept in, he remembered standing at the North Pole, holding that small silver bell, realizing that belief was a choice he could make again and again. It did not erase hardship, but it gave meaning to endurance. The magic he had witnessed as a child transformed into a quieter strength, guiding him through moments when certainty felt out of reach. One Christmas Eve, many years later, he stood by his own window, watching snow fall gently onto the darkened street below. The world felt calm, suspended between past and future. Without thinking too much, he reached into a drawer and took out the bell, its surface worn but still shining. He rang it softly, and the familiar sound filled the room, clear as it had ever been. In that instant, he was no longer bound by age or time. He was once again that boy standing on a magical train, learning that belief was not something you outgrew, but something you carried forward. Outside, the distant sound of a train whistle drifted through the cold night air. He smiled to himself, unsure whether it was real or imagined, and realized that it didn't matter. What mattered was that he still believed. The memory of the Polar Express, the journey to the North Pole, and the lesson hidden within that adventure had shaped the way he saw the world. Belief had taught him kindness, courage, and the value of holding on to wonder even when logic suggested otherwise. As the bell's echo faded, he carefully placed it back where it belonged, knowing that one day he might share its story with someone else who needed to hear it. Perhaps a child standing at the edge of doubt, wondering whether magic could exist in a world that often felt too practical and too loud. He hoped that when that moment came, the bell would ring for them too. Because belief, once passed on, had a way of continuing its journey. Much like the Polar Express itself, forever traveling through snowy nights, toward those willing to listen. Long after that winter night had settled into memory, the boy's life continued to unfold in ways that felt ordinary on the surface, but were quietly shaped by what he had learned. Seasons changed, cities shifted, and faces around him came and went. Yet somewhere deep inside, the rhythm of the train wheels never truly stopped. He noticed it most during moments of stillness, when the noise of the world softened and his thoughts wandered back to snow-covered tracks, stretching endlessly into the dark. Those memories were not loud or overwhelming. Instead, they lived like a gentle hum, reminding him that there was always more beneath what the eye could see. As he moved through school and into adulthood, the world seemed increasingly eager to label belief as weakness. Logic, efficiency, and practicality became the tools people relied on, and imagination was often treated as something to be outgrown. The boy, now a young man, learned how to function within that reality. He studied, worked, and built a life that looked sensible from the outside. Yet he never allowed himself to fully abandon the sense of wonder that had once carried him to the North Pole. He learned to balance both worlds, understanding that belief did not require rejecting reason, only refusing to let it erase hope. Every winter, Christmas Eve carried a particular weight for him. The air felt different, charged with the same anticipation he had felt as a child, listening for a distant whistle. He would pause during those nights, even if only briefly, and let himself remember the warmth of the train, the laughter echoing through its cars, and the conductor's calm presence guiding them forward. These memories did not feel like nostalgia alone. They felt like anchors, grounding him when life became uncertain or overwhelming. He began to notice belief showing up in unexpected places. It appeared in the kindness of strangers, in moments when people chose compassion over convenience, and in the quiet resilience of those who refused to give up despite hardship. He realized that the lesson of the bell was never limited to Santa or magic trains. It was about trust, about choosing to believe in goodness even when proof felt scarce. In that way, the journey he took as a child continued to unfold, revealing new meanings as he matured. At times, doubt crept in, especially during moments of loss or disappointment. There were nights when the world felt heavy, when promises were broken and outcomes fell short of hope. During those moments, he wondered if belief was simply a comforting illusion, something people clung to because reality was too harsh. Yet every time that thought surfaced, he remembered standing at the North Pole, unable to hear the bell until he chose to believe. The memory reminded him that belief was not about certainty. It was about choice. And choices, even quiet ones, had power. One year, he found himself volunteering during the holiday season, helping organize a small event for children who had little reason to believe in magic. He watched their faces light up at simple gestures, at stories told with sincerity, at moments when someone paid attention to them without expecting anything in return. In those smiles, he saw reflections of himself as a child, standing on a train platform unsure whether to step forward. He realized then that belief could be shared, not forced but offered, like an open door, waiting for someone to walk through. As he grew older, the bell became less a physical object and more a symbol he carried internally. It reminded him to listen, not just with his ears, but with his heart. He learned to hear meaning in silence, to find hope in small details others overlooked. Life did not become easier because of this, but it became richer. Even disappointment held lessons, shaping him into someone who understood the value of patience and empathy. There were moments when he imagined the Polar Express continuing its endless journey, stopping at homes across different generations, inviting new children to take a chance on belief. He liked to think that somewhere, at that very moment, another child stood hesitating in the snow, wondering whether to board. The thought comforted him, reinforcing the idea that belief was timeless, passed quietly from one heart to another. As the years stretched on, he understood that the magic of that night was never meant to remain frozen in childhood. It was meant to evolve, transforming into wisdom rather than fantasy. The wonder he once felt became a guiding principle, shaping how he treated others and how he responded to the world. He no longer needed visible proof of magic to believe in it. He saw it in human connection, in perseverance, and in moments of unexpected grace. On one particularly quiet Christmas Eve, he found himself alone, listening to snow tap gently against the window. The world outside was hushed, as if holding its breath. He closed his eyes and imagined the sound of a train whistle far away. Whether it was memory or imagination no longer mattered. What mattered was the feeling it stirred within him, a sense of belonging to something larger than himself. He smiled, realizing that belief had never left him. It had simply changed form, becoming a steady presence rather than a dazzling spectacle. The journey he began as a child had not ended at the North Pole. It had continued through every choice he made afterward, and as long as he remained willing to listen for the bell, he knew that the magic of that night would never truly fade. As time moved forward, the lessons he carried from that journey began to influence the way he interacted with the world around him. He became someone people felt comfortable opening up to, not because he had all the answers, but because he listened with patience. He understood that belief often showed itself in the simple act of being present. When others spoke about their fears, dreams, or regrets, he did not dismiss them as unrealistic or naive. Instead, he treated those thoughts as important. Recognizing that every person carried their own version of a bell they were struggling to hear. Life brought responsibilities that demanded his attention. Work deadlines, financial pressures, and personal expectations piled up, threatening to dull the sense of wonder he had protected for so long. Yet even during the busiest days, he found small rituals to keep that inner spark alive. Sometimes it was as simple as pausing to watch snowfall during winter evenings, or replaying a familiar melody that reminded him of hot chocolate steaming in porcelain cups. These moments acted like quiet checkpoints, reminding him that life was not meant to be rushed past without reflection. He noticed how quickly people forgot the importance of belief once they were told it was impractical. Children grew into adults who laughed at the idea of magic, even though they once relied on it to make sense of the world. Observing this shift saddened him, but it also strengthened his resolve. He realized that holding on to belief required courage, not ignorance. It meant choosing hope when cynicism felt easier, choosing empathy when indifference seemed more convenient. One winter, during a particularly challenging period of his life, he faced a decision that tested everything he believed. An opportunity presented itself that promised security, but required compromising values he held dear. Friends encouraged him to be realistic, reminding him that belief did not pay bills or guarantee stability. For days, he wrestled with doubt, questioning whether holding on to ideals was worth the risk. In the end, he remembered the night he stood on the train platform, heart pounding, uncertain but hopeful. He chose the path that aligned with his inner compass, trusting that belief, when honored, often led to unexpected outcomes. That decision did not immediately reward him. In fact, it brought setbacks that forced him to adapt and endure. Yet, during those moments of uncertainty, he felt strangely calm. It was as if the rhythm of the train guided him forward, assuring him that not all journeys revealed their purpose right away. Slowly, doors opened in ways he could not have predicted. Opportunities emerged that allowed him to grow without sacrificing who he was. Through this experience, he learned that belief was not passive optimism, but an active commitment to integrity. As years passed, he found himself sharing stories with younger generations. Not as grand tales of magic, but as lessons wrapped in warmth. He spoke about choosing kindness, about listening to intuition, and about trusting that not everything meaningful could be measured or explained. Children listened with curiosity, while adults often smiled politely, unsure whether to take his words seriously. He understood that belief could not be forced. It had to be discovered individually, just as it had been for him. During one quiet holiday season, he returned to his childhood home. The house felt smaller than he remembered, yet it carried echoes of laughter and wonder. Sitting alone in his old room, he thought about the boy who once lay awake, listening for reindeer hooves on the roof. That boy was still part of him, not as a memory frozen in time, but as a guiding presence that shaped his choices. He realized that growing older did not mean losing belief. It meant learning how to carry it responsibly. He began to see belief as a thread connecting people across time. Generations before him had relied on stories, rituals, and shared hope to endure hardship and uncertainty. The Polar Express was one such story, a reminder that belief was not about escaping reality, but about enriching it. By choosing to believe, people gave themselves permission to imagine better futures and work toward them. In moments of solitude, he imagined the conductor watching over countless journeys, guiding each traveler with quiet confidence. The conductor never demanded belief. He simply offered the opportunity. That realization resonated deeply. Belief thrived best when invited gently, not imposed. The world, he thought, would be kinder if more people adopted that approach. As the holiday lights illuminated streets and homes, he felt gratitude for the journey that shaped him. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it taught him how to see the extraordinary within the ordinary. He understood now that belief did not disappear with age. It matured, becoming more nuanced and resilient. It allowed him to face disappointment without bitterness and success without arrogance. On another Christmas Eve, surrounded by silence and snowfall, he closed his eyes and listened. There was no whistle, no visible train, yet the familiar feeling returned. He smiled, knowing that the sound he listened for no longer came from the outside. It lived within him, steady and reassuring. The journey continued, not along steel tracks, but through choices, compassion, and quiet acts of faith. He understood that belief was not something to outgrow, but something to grow into. And as long as he remained willing to listen, the bell would always ring, reminding him that magic, in its truest form, never truly fades. With time, he noticed how belief quietly influenced the smallest decisions people made every day. It shaped the way they treated strangers, how they responded to disappointment, and whether they chose hope over resentment. He began paying closer attention to these moments, realizing that belief was not loud or dramatic. It showed itself in patience during long lines, in forgiveness after misunderstandings, and in the courage to start over when things fell apart. These were not magical acts in the traditional sense, yet they carried a power that could reshape lives. As he moved through different phases of adulthood, relationships came and went, each leaving behind lessons. Some connections faded naturally, while others ended painfully, forcing him to confront feelings he would rather have avoided. In those moments, belief acted as a stabilizing force. It reminded him that loss did not erase meaning, and that endings often cleared space for something new. Instead of closing himself off, he learned to remain open, trusting that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a form of strength. He began to notice how fear often disguised itself as practicality. People avoided risks, not because they lacked dreams, but because they feared disappointment. Watching this pattern unfold around him reinforced his commitment to belief. He understood that believing did not guarantee success, but it guaranteed authenticity. It allowed him to live honestly, even when outcomes were uncertain. That honesty brought a sense of peace that no external validation could replace. During a particularly reflective period, he took a long trip alone, seeking clarity rather than escape. The journey was quiet, filled with long stretches of road and changing landscapes. Without distractions, memories resurfaced with surprising intensity. He thought about the train ride that once carried him toward wonder and how it continued to influence his choices. That experience taught him that journeys mattered not because of where they ended, but because of how they transformed the traveler along the way. In small towns and unfamiliar cities, he met people who shared fragments of their lives without hesitation. A shop owner spoke about dreams abandoned and rediscovered, while a fellow traveler confessed fears about growing older without purpose. These conversations felt meaningful, as if belief acted as an invisible bridge connecting strangers. He realized that people often longed to believe, but needed permission to do so. By listening without judgment, he offered that permission quietly. Returning home, he carried these insights with him. Life resumed its usual rhythm, yet something had shifted internally. He approached challenges with renewed curiosity, asking not what he stood to lose, but what he might learn. This change affected his work, relationships, and even the way he spent his free time. He chose activities that nurtured growth rather than distraction, valuing depth over convenience. He also became more mindful of how stories shaped belief. Movies, books, and shared memories all played a role in keeping imagination alive. He understood now that stories were not meant to deceive, but to reveal truths that logic alone could not capture. The Polar Express was one such story, offering a framework for understanding belief as a lifelong companion rather than a childhood fantasy. During another holiday season, he volunteered to help organize community events. Watching children laugh and adults momentarily forget their worries reminded him of the importance of shared experiences. These moments did not erase hardship, but they softened its edges. He saw how belief thrived in collective spaces, growing stronger when nurtured together, rather than guarded privately. One evening, after a long day, he found himself reflecting on the concept of certainty. He realized that many people sought certainty as a substitute for belief, assuming that confidence required guarantees. Yet his own experiences taught him otherwise. Belief existed precisely because certainty was impossible. It filled the gaps left by unanswered questions, allowing people to move forward despite ambiguity. As years continued to pass, he noticed subtle changes in himself. He became less reactive, more thoughtful, and increasingly aware of the interconnectedness of actions and consequences. Belief guided these changes, encouraging him to act with intention. Even mistakes became opportunities for reflection, rather than sources of shame. He learned to apologize sincerely, forgive generously, and let go of grudges that weighed him down. He sometimes wondered how different his life might have been without that early journey. Perhaps he would have still found his way, but he doubted it would have been with the same sense of wonder. The train ride offered him a lens through which to view the world, one that balanced realism with imagination. It taught him that belief did not require denying reality, but engaging with it more fully. On quiet nights, he found comfort in solitude, reflecting on how belief evolved over time. It no longer felt like something he needed to defend or explain. It simply existed, woven into his perspective. He understood now that belief was deeply personal, shaped by experience and choice. No two people believed in exactly the same way, yet the underlying desire for meaning connected them all. As another year drew to a close, he felt gratitude for the uncertainty that once frightened him. Uncertainty created space for growth, creativity, and connection. Belief allowed him to navigate that space with grace rather than fear. He recognized that the journey was ongoing, with no final destination or definitive answers. Standing beneath a sky filled with stars, he reflected on how small individual lives seemed within the vastness of the universe. Instead of feeling insignificant, he felt inspired. Belief transformed that vastness into possibility, reminding him that meaning was not dictated by scale but by intention. Every kind act, every honest choice, and every moment of courage contributed to a larger story. He smiled, realizing that belief had become his compass. It guided him not toward perfection, but toward authenticity. And as long as he remained willing to listen, to hope, and to act with integrity, the journey would continue, unfolding one step at a time. As time moved forward, he began to understand that belief was not something you either had or lost completely. It shifted, weakened, strengthened, and reshaped itself depending on circumstances. There were days when doubt crept in quietly, usually during moments of exhaustion or disappointment. On those days, belief did not vanish, but it rested beneath the surface, waiting to be rediscovered. He learned not to panic when it felt distant, trusting that it would return in its own time. Work life introduced a different kind of challenge. Deadlines, expectations, and unspoken competition often pushed people towards cynicism. He saw colleagues, who once dreamed boldly, become guarded and cautious, choosing safety over curiosity. Watching this transformation unsettled him. He recognized the same pattern trying to form within himself, especially after setbacks. Instead of resisting change entirely, he chose awareness. By acknowledging frustration without letting it harden him, he preserved the part of himself that still believed growth was possible. Failure became one of his most important teachers. Each misstep revealed something valuable about his limits and assumptions. Rather than interpreting failure as proof of inadequacy, he began to see it as evidence of effort. Belief reframed these moments, reminding him that progress rarely followed a straight path. Every stumble carried information, and every lesson brought him closer to clarity. This mindset reduced fear, allowing him to try again with patience rather than desperation. He also grew more attentive to silence. In a world filled with constant noise, silence offered perspective. Long walks without music, mornings spent watching light change through windows, and evenings without screens became essential rituals. In these quiet spaces, he heard his own thoughts more clearly. Belief often emerged here, not as a grand declaration, but as a gentle reassurance that he was moving in the right direction. Even when outcomes remained uncertain, relationships continued to evolve. Some deepened through shared vulnerability, while others faded when values no longer aligned. He stopped viewing distance as failure. People grew at different speeds, in different directions. Holding on to belief meant respecting that process, even when it involved letting go. He learned that connection did not require permanence to be meaningful. Temporary bonds could still leave lasting impressions. During one reflective winter, memories of the Polar Express returned with unexpected clarity. The snow, the sound of the bell, and the feeling of stepping into the unknown replayed vividly. He realized that the story endured because it mirrored real life more closely than he once thought. The train represented moments of choice, the conductor symbolized guidance, and the journey reflected transformation. These symbols remained relevant because they adapted to each stage of life. He began sharing this perspective with younger people whenever the opportunity arose. Instead of offering advice, he shared experiences, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. He emphasized curiosity over certainty, explaining that belief thrived when questions were welcomed rather than avoided. Watching others wrestle with doubt reminded him of his own journey, reinforcing the cyclical nature of growth. Creativity re-entered his life in subtle ways. He started writing again, not with the goal of publishing, but as a means of exploration. Words became a way to examine belief from different angles, uncovering emotions he had not fully acknowledged. Through writing, he recognized patterns in his thinking, identifying moments where fear disguised itself as logic. This awareness allowed him to challenge assumptions gently rather than aggressively. Community played a larger role than he anticipated. He discovered that belief strengthened when shared. Conversations with friends, collaborative projects, and acts of service all reinforced a sense of purpose. These interactions reminded him that belief was not only internal, but relational. It grew through empathy, trust, and mutual support. Even brief encounters had the potential to restore faith in human connection. He also confronted regret during this period. Past decisions surfaced, some accompanied by lingering questions about what might have been. Instead of dwelling on alternative timelines, he chose reflection without judgment. Belief helped him accept that regret was not an enemy, but a signal pointing toward values. By understanding what he wished he had done differently, he clarified what mattered most moving forward. As seasons changed, he noticed a shift in how he measured success. External markers like recognition and status lost their appeal. Fulfillment came from alignment rather than achievement. He valued days that felt intentional, even if they appeared ordinary from the outside. Belief reframed simplicity as richness, teaching him that meaning often hid in overlooked details. He became more comfortable with vulnerability, understanding that openness invited connection rather than criticism. Sharing uncertainty did not weaken his position. It humanized him. Others responded with honesty of their own, creating spaces where belief could be discussed openly, without fear of ridicule. These exchanges reinforced his understanding that belief did not require consensus to be valid. As another holiday season approached, familiar traditions returned, carrying both nostalgia and reflection. He observed how rituals evolved alongside people, retaining their essence while adapting to new circumstances. Belief operated similarly. It maintained continuity while allowing growth. This realization brought comfort, assuring him that change did not erase identity but expanded it. On a quiet evening, he revisited the idea of wonder. He realized that wonder was not exclusive to childhood. It simply required attention. Looking up at the night sky, listening to music deeply, or engaging fully in conversation, all reignited that sense of awe. Belief acted as the gateway, encouraging him to remain receptive, rather than dismissive. He acknowledged that belief did not protect against pain. Loss, disappointment, and uncertainty remained inevitable. However, belief influenced how he responded to these experiences. Instead of becoming defensive, he remained curious. Instead of withdrawing, he leaned into connection. This approach transformed adversity into growth, reinforcing resilience without denying emotion. As he reflected on the path behind him, gratitude surfaced naturally, not for perfection, but for progress. Belief had guided him through confusion, steadied him during doubt, and inspired him to continue evolving. He understood now that belief was less about answers and more about orientation. It pointed him forward, even when the destination remained unclear. He smiled at the thought that the journey was far from over. New challenges awaited, along with opportunities for discovery. With belief as his companion, he felt prepared to face whatever came next, not because he expected ease, but because he trusted his capacity to adapt, learn, and remain open. The following months carried him into unfamiliar emotional terrain. Change no longer felt abrupt. It arrived gradually, almost politely, giving him time to adjust. He noticed how his reactions softened. Situations that once triggered impatience now invited curiosity. Instead of asking why things were happening to him, he asked what they were teaching him. That subtle shift altered everything. Belief was no longer a distant idea. It had become an active lens through which he interpreted life. He began to notice patterns in people's behavior that mirrored earlier versions of himself. The defensiveness, the hesitation to trust, the fear of appearing foolish for believing too much. Rather than judging these traits, he recognized them as survival strategies. Everyone carried their own history, shaping how openly they approached hope. This understanding deepened his empathy. Belief, he realized, flourished not through agreement, but through compassion. Time itself felt different. Days no longer rushed past unnoticed. He paid closer attention to transitions, the pause between waking and starting the day, the quiet moment after a conversation ended, the stillness before sleep. These spaces, once overlooked, became meaningful. They reminded him that belief often lived in the in-between, not in dramatic milestones, but in subtle awareness. Professional life continued to test his values. Opportunities arose that promised security but demanded compromise. He weighed each decision carefully, listening not only to logic but to intuition. Belief guided him here as well, acting as an internal compass. He learned that saying no could be just as powerful as saying yes, especially when alignment was at stake. This clarity reduced regret, even when outcomes were uncertain. He revisited old friendships with a new perspective. Some connections reignited effortlessly, as if no time had passed. Others felt strained, weighed down by unspoken expectations. Instead of forcing continuity, he allowed relationships to exist as they were. Belief taught him that authenticity mattered more than consistency. People could drift without diminishing the value of shared history. There were moments of loneliness, unexpected and sharp. They arrived during quiet weekends or after meaningful interactions ended. Rather than escaping these feelings, he sat with them. He discovered that loneliness was not emptiness, but an invitation inward. In those moments, belief reminded him that solitude could be restorative, offering space to reconnect with himself. He returned again to the imagery of the Polar Express, now seeing it through a more mature lens. The journey was not about reaching the North Pole, but about choosing to board the train despite uncertainty. Each phase of life offered its own version of that choice. Belief was the act of stepping aboard, even when the destination felt unclear. This metaphor resonated deeply, reinforcing his commitment to openness. Learning became a lifelong pursuit rather than a structured obligation. He explored topics not for productivity, but for wonder. Philosophy, art, science all offered new ways to understand existence. Belief thrived in this curiosity, expanding rather than narrowing his worldview. The more he learned, the more comfortable he became with not knowing everything. Physical health gained importance as well. He recognized the connection between body and mind, understanding that belief required care on both fronts. Movement became a form of meditation. Long walks, stretching, and mindful breathing grounded him. These practices reinforced presence, making belief tangible rather than abstract. He noticed how media consumption affected his mindset. Constant exposure to negativity dulled his sense of possibility. Gradually, he became more selective, choosing content that informed without overwhelming. This intentionality preserved mental space for reflection. Belief, he realized, needed room to breathe. Protecting that space became an act of self-respect. Family dynamics evolved in subtle ways. Conversations grew more honest, less performative. He shared vulnerabilities he once hid, and was met with understanding rather than judgment. These exchanges reshaped his perception of strength. Belief reframed vulnerability as courage, reinforcing the idea that openness fostered connection. He began mentoring others informally, offering guidance without authority. He listened more than he spoke, trusting that people often found their own answers when given space. Belief influenced this approach, emphasizing support over control. Watching others navigate their own journeys reminded him that belief multiplied when shared. Doubt still appeared, but it no longer dominated. When uncertainty surfaced, he acknowledged it without resistance. Belief did not eliminate doubt. It coexisted with it. This balance allowed him to move forward without false confidence. He accepted that clarity often arrived after action, not before. Creativity continued to evolve. Writing expanded into other forms: music, visual art, spontaneous ideas scribbled in notebooks. These expressions were imperfect, but genuine. Belief encouraged experimentation without attachment to outcome. Creation became a dialogue rather than a performance. He reflected on past fears that once seemed insurmountable. Looking back, he saw how each fear had softened with time and exposure. Belief had not removed obstacles, but it had reduced their power. By facing uncertainty repeatedly, he built resilience quietly, without fanfare. Travel offered new insights. Visiting unfamiliar places disrupted routine, inviting fresh perspectives. He observed how belief manifested differently across cultures, shaped by tradition and environment. This diversity enriched his understanding, reminding him that belief was universal, though expressed uniquely. Moments of joy appeared unexpectedly. Laughter during mundane tasks, connection with strangers, beauty in ordinary scenes. He learned to recognize these moments without clinging to them. Belief taught appreciation without attachment, allowing joy to pass through rather than be possessed. As responsibilities increased, he learned the art of balance. Commitment did not require self-neglect. He established boundaries that honored both ambition and well-being. Belief supported this equilibrium, reinforcing the idea that sustainability mattered more than intensity. He confronted the fear of stagnation, questioning whether comfort might dull growth. Instead of seeking constant disruption, he embraced mindful progression. Belief reassured him that growth could be gentle, unfolding naturally rather than forcefully. As the year progressed, he felt a quiet confidence settle in. Not arrogance, but trust. Trust in his ability to adapt, to learn, to remain open. Belief had matured, shedding naivety without losing wonder. It no longer demanded certainty, only engagement. He recognized that belief was not a destination, but a practice. It required attention, care, and renewal. Some days it felt effortless. Others demanded intention. Accepting this rhythm prevented burnout, allowing belief to evolve organically. In moments of reflection, he expressed gratitude not for ease, but for resilience. Each challenge had shaped him, refining belief through experience. He understood now that belief was less about optimism and more about presence, showing up fully, even when outcomes were uncertain. As he looked ahead, anticipation replaced anxiety. The future remained unknown, but inviting. With belief as his guide, he felt equipped to navigate whatever emerged. The journey continued, not defined by milestones, but by movement. With the passing of time, he began to sense a deeper calm settling into his everyday life. It wasn't the kind of peace that erased problems or silenced uncertainty, but a steadier presence that allowed him to face both without panic. Challenges still arrived, sometimes unexpectedly, yet his response had changed. Instead of bracing himself as if for impact, he leaned into each moment, trusting that he could handle whatever followed. This trust was quiet, almost invisible, but powerful. He noticed how silence no longer felt awkward. Earlier in life, quiet moments made him restless, pushing him to seek distraction. Now, silence felt like an ally. In those pauses, thoughts surfaced naturally, without force. He listened to himself more carefully, recognizing emotional shifts before they turned into tension. Belief played a role here too, reminding him that inner awareness was not self-indulgence, but daily routines gained meaning beyond efficiency. Simple actions: preparing meals, organizing his space, stepping outside for fresh air became grounding rituals. He approached them with intention, understanding that stability was built through repetition. Belief transformed routine into rhythm, making life feel cohesive rather than fragmented. Each small act reinforced continuity, anchoring him in the present. He reflected often on expectations those placed on him and those he placed on himself. Over time, he learned to separate aspiration from pressure. Wanting growth was natural. Punishing himself for not arriving fast enough was unnecessary. Belief softened this internal dialogue, replacing criticism with patience. Progress, he realized, was rarely linear, and detours were not failures. Social interactions continued to evolve. He became more attentive during conversations, less focused on responding and more on understanding. People noticed this shift. They opened up more freely, sensing genuine presence. Through these exchanges, belief expanded outward, shaping not just his internal world but his relationships as well. Listening, he learned, was one of the purest expressions of belief in another person. He also faced moments when belief wavered. Unexpected setbacks tested his resolve, stirring old doubts. Instead of retreating, he acknowledged these feelings openly. Belief did not demand unwavering confidence. It allowed vulnerability. By naming his uncertainty, he reduced its grip. Doubt lost its power when brought into the light. Memory played an interesting role during this period. Certain experiences resurfaced with new clarity, as if waiting for the right moment to be understood. Past decisions, once sources of regret, now appeared as necessary steps. Belief reframed memory, transforming self-judgment into insight. He forgave himself more easily, recognizing growth where he once saw mistakes. Creative exploration deepened further. He experimented without expectations, allowing ideas to unfold naturally. Some attempts failed outright. Others surprised him. Belief encouraged this openness, emphasizing process over outcome. Creation became an act of curiosity rather than validation. Through this lens, even unfinished work held value. He spent more time outdoors, drawn to natural settings that reminded him of scale and perspective. Watching the movement of clouds, the persistence of trees, the rhythm of seasons all reinforced a sense of continuity beyond individual concerns. Belief expanded here too, connecting personal experience to something larger. Nature offered reassurance without explanation. His relationship with ambition shifted subtly. Goals remained important, but they no longer defined his worth. He pursued growth with flexibility, allowing priorities to evolve. Belief supported this adaptability, reminding him that success was not a fixed destination but an evolving alignment between values and action. He observed how moments of discomfort often preceded meaningful change. Rather than avoiding these moments, he approached them with curiosity. What lesson might emerge? What pattern was being challenged? Belief transformed discomfort into a signal rather than a threat. This perspective reduced resistance, allowing transformation to occur more naturally. Technology, once a constant companion, became more deliberate. He established boundaries around its use, reclaiming attention for deeper engagement. This intentionality protected mental clarity, preserving space for reflection. Belief, he realized, required presence, and presence demanded discernment. He became more comfortable expressing appreciation. Gratitude was no longer reserved for major milestones. It appeared in small acknowledgments, thanking someone for their time, recognizing effort, appreciating shared moments. These gestures strengthened connection. Belief found expression through recognition, reinforcing mutual respect. Family conversations grew richer, moving beyond surface updates to meaningful exchange. Shared stories revealed perspectives he hadn't considered before. Belief expanded through these dialogues, reminding him that understanding was ongoing. Even familiar relationships held undiscovered layers. As the months unfolded, he felt less urgency to define himself. Labels lost importance, replaced by experience. He allowed identity to remain fluid, shaped by learning rather than expectation. Belief thrived in this openness, encouraging exploration without confinement. Moments of joy became quieter but more frequent. Satisfaction replaced excitement, offering a steadier sense of fulfillment. He learned to savor these moments without announcing them, understanding that not all happiness needed an audience. Belief supported this intimacy, valuing authenticity over display. He continued to revisit the metaphor of the train journey. Each phase of life felt like a new carriage, offering different views but moving in the same direction. Belief was the ticket he carried, not a guarantee, but permission to remain aboard. This image grounded him during transitions, reminding him that movement itself held meaning. He noticed how belief influenced resilience. When plans unraveled, he adapted more easily. Flexibility replaced rigidity, allowing him to reframe setbacks as redirections. This mindset reduced frustration, preserving energy for constructive response. He practiced honesty with himself, acknowledging both strengths and limitations. Belief did not demand perfection. It encouraged integrity. By accepting limitations, he avoided overextension, maintaining balance. This self-awareness enhanced confidence rather than diminishing it. Learning continued organically. He sought knowledge not to impress, but to understand. Curiosity guided him toward diverse subjects, enriching perspective. Belief thrived in this intellectual humility, welcoming questions without demanding immediate answers. As he moved forward, he sensed a growing alignment between intention and action. Decisions felt less conflicted, guided by an internal coherence. Belief acted as a stabilizing force, harmonizing thought and behavior. Reflection became a regular practice. He reviewed experiences, not to judge but to integrate. Each reflection added depth, reinforcing lessons learned. Belief supported this integration, ensuring that growth was cumulative rather than repetitive. He acknowledged uncertainty about the future, but it no longer intimidated him. Instead, it invited engagement. Belief transformed uncertainty into possibility, encouraging exploration without attachment. This openness fostered resilience, preparing him for change without fear. As this phase drew to a close, he felt gratitude for the journey thus far. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. Belief had evolved from concept to companion, shaping perception and response. With this foundation, he felt ready to continue, wherever the path might lead. The rhythm of his days continued to settle into something both familiar and quietly transformative. He woke each morning without the weight of urgency that once pressed against his chest. Time still mattered, responsibilities still waited, but his relationship with them had shifted. He no longer felt chased by the clock. Instead, he moved alongside it, allowing moments to unfold without resistance. Belief shaped this shift, gently reminding him that presence was more valuable than speed. He became more intentional about beginnings. The way a day started often influenced its tone, so he paid attention to those first moments. A deep breath before leaving bed, a moment of stillness before checking messages, a quiet acknowledgement of the day ahead. These small choices created space. Belief lived in that space, turning ordinary mornings into grounding rituals rather than rushed transitions. As his awareness sharpened, he noticed patterns he had once overlooked. Emotional cycles repeated themselves. Subtle triggers resurfaced. Familiar reactions emerged. Instead of judging these patterns, he observed them. Why did certain situations spark impatience? Why did others bring unexpected calm? Belief encouraged curiosity over criticism, transforming self-observation into a tool rather than a verdict. Work took on a different texture as well. Tasks were no longer just items to complete, but opportunities to practice focus. He engaged more deeply, not because he had to prove anything, but because attention itself felt meaningful. Belief reinforced the idea that effort was not about external validation, but internal alignment. When he worked with intention, outcomes improved naturally. He also learned the value of stepping back. There were days when productivity slowed, when energy dipped without explanation. In the past, he would have forced momentum, pushing himself harder. Now, he listened. Rest became a form of respect rather than weakness. Belief validated this pause, recognizing recovery as an essential part of progress. Conversations with himself grew kinder. The internal voice that once demanded perfection softened. Mistakes were acknowledged without exaggeration. Successes were appreciated without arrogance. Belief balanced this inner dialogue, ensuring that self-talk supported growth instead of sabotaging it. This shift reduced mental noise, creating clarity. He revisited old goals with fresh eyes. Some still resonated deeply, others felt outdated. Rather than clinging to past ambitions out of obligation, he allowed them to evolve. Belief gave him permission to change direction without guilt. Growth, he realized, sometimes meant letting go. Relationships continued to mature. He became more comfortable expressing boundaries, not as defenses, but as expressions of honesty. Saying no longer felt like rejection. It felt like alignment. Belief strengthened this confidence, reminding him that healthy connections respected limits. At the same time, he practiced generosity with his time and attention. When he said yes, he did so fully. Presence replaced half engagement. This sincerity deepened bonds, creating trust through consistency. Belief flowed through these interactions, shaping connection through authenticity. He found himself reflecting on the concept of home not as a physical place, but as an internal state. Home was where he felt grounded, where effort and rest coexisted peacefully. Over time, he realized he carried this sense of home within him. Belief anchored this realization, offering stability, regardless of location or circumstance. Creativity resurfaced in unexpected ways. Ideas emerged during walks, while cooking, during quiet observation. He captured them without pressure, allowing inspiration to remain playful. Belief removed the need for immediate results, preserving curiosity. Creation became exploration again. He also became more aware of how stories influenced perception. Narratives he told himself about past failures, future fears, personal limits all shaped experience. By adjusting these stories, he adjusted reality. Belief acted as the editor, trimming exaggeration, adding compassion, restoring balance. Moments of challenge still arrived, sometimes abruptly. A sudden disappointment, an unplanned obstacle, a misunderstood intention. Instead of reacting defensively, he paused. What response aligned with who he was becoming? Belief guided this pause, offering clarity before action. This restraint often prevented unnecessary conflict. He noticed how patience had grown, not as passive waiting, but as active trust. Trust that effort would compound. Trust that answers would emerge. Trust that timing mattered. Belief sustained his patience, preventing frustration from eroding motivation. Learning from others became more deliberate. He listened to experiences beyond his own, absorbing perspectives without comparison. Belief valued diversity of thought, recognizing wisdom in difference. This openness expanded understanding, enriching his worldview. He developed a deeper appreciation for uncertainty. Rather than demanding certainty before moving forward, he accepted incomplete information. Decisions were made with the best available insight, adjusted as new information emerged. Belief thrived in this flexibility, supporting progress without paralysis. Physical awareness also increased. He paid attention to how his body responded to stress, rest, movement. Gentle adjustments, stretching, walking, breathing enhanced well-being. Belief connected mind and body, reinforcing the idea that balance was holistic. He redefined success quietly. It was no longer measured solely by milestones, but by consistency. Showing up honestly, acting with intention, adjusting when necessary. Belief validated this definition, ensuring fulfillment was sustainable rather than fleeting. There were moments of nostalgia, reflections on earlier versions of himself. Instead of regret, he felt appreciation. Each version had served a purpose, carrying him forward. Belief reframed the past as preparation rather than burden. As evenings arrived, he embraced reflection without rumination. What had the day offered? What had it taught? These questions guided gentle review. Belief transformed reflection into integration, allowing lessons to settle naturally. He recognized how belief itself had evolved. It was no longer loud or dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It simply existed, steady, supportive, adaptable. This quiet confidence felt more reliable than any certainty he had known before. Looking ahead, he didn't seek a defined destination. Direction mattered more than arrival. Growth mattered more than completion. Belief accompanied him here too, assuring him that continuation itself was meaningful. With this understanding, he moved forward, not hurried, not hesitant, but aligned. Each step carried intention. Each pause carried awareness. Belief remained present, not as a promise of ease, but as a commitment to engagement. And that, he realized, was enough. The days that followed unfolded with a gentler kind of confidence. Not the loud assurance that demanded attention, but a quiet steadiness that guided his choices almost automatically. He didn't announce changes anymore, he lived them. Each decision, no matter how small, reflected an internal alignment that no longer needed validation. Belief had settled into his actions so naturally that it felt inseparable from who he was becoming. He noticed how silence had gained meaning. Moments without sound were no longer empty or awkward. They carried weight, offering space to process thoughts that once raced uncontrollably. In that stillness, clarity surfaced. Problems that had seemed tangled revealed simpler shapes when observed without urgency. Belief thrived in these pauses, reminding him that answers often arrived when noise faded. His attention toward details sharpened. The way light shifted through a window at different hours, the rhythm of footsteps on a familiar path, the subtle expressions on faces during conversation. These observations anchored him to the present, preventing his mind from drifting too far ahead or backward. Belief reinforced this grounding, making awareness feel like a form of respect toward life itself. There were moments when old habits attempted a return. Doubt whispered familiar arguments. Fear tried to reassert control. Instead of resisting aggressively, he acknowledged their presence. These emotions were not enemies. They were signals. Belief allowed him to listen without surrendering authority. By recognizing these patterns early, he prevented them from shaping outcomes. He became more selective with energy. Not everything deserved a reaction. Not every opinion required defense. This discernment preserved focus, allowing him to invest fully where it mattered. Belief supported this restraint, reframing selectivity as wisdom rather than withdrawal. Learning shifted from accumulation to integration. He no longer chased information endlessly. Instead, he absorbed what resonated and applied it practically. Knowledge without embodiment felt incomplete. Belief bridged this gap, encouraging action informed by understanding rather than theory alone. His relationship with uncertainty continued to evolve. Ambiguity no longer felt threatening. It became an invitation to explore. When outcomes were unclear, he trusted adaptability over prediction. Belief strengthened this trust, replacing anxiety with curiosity. He noticed how gratitude subtly influenced perception. It didn't erase challenges, but it balanced perspective. By acknowledging what was working alongside what needed attention, he maintained equilibrium. Belief anchored this practice, ensuring gratitude remained genuine rather than forced. Creative expression expanded beyond traditional forms. Problem-solving became creative. Communication became expressive. Even routine tasks carried an element of improvisation. Belief encouraged experimentation without fear of imperfection, restoring playfulness to effort. He revisited memories differently now. Instead of reliving them emotionally, he examined them contextually. What had they taught? How had they shaped resilience? This reframing reduced emotional charge while preserving insight. Belief acted as the lens through which these reflections gained meaning without burden. Trust became a recurring theme, not blind trust, but informed trust. Trust in process. Trust in intuition. Trust in the ability to respond effectively, even when plans unraveled. Belief fortified this trust, ensuring confidence was rooted in experience rather than assumption. He found himself less attached to outcomes and more committed to values. Success was measured by integrity, not applause. Effort aligned with principle rather than pressure. Belief safeguarded this alignment, protecting it from external distortion. Relationships deepened through presence rather than intensity. Listening replaced convincing. Understanding replaced assumption. This shift transformed interactions into exchanges rather than transactions. Belief reinforced empathy as strength, not vulnerability. Moments of solitude became restorative rather than isolating. Alone time allowed recalibration. It offered a chance to realign intentions without external influence. Belief honored this solitude, recognizing it as essential maintenance. His sense of identity loosened. He no longer defined himself strictly by roles or labels. Instead, identity became fluid, a collection of values expressed through action. Belief thrived in this flexibility, preventing stagnation. He recognized how consistency compounded quietly. Small actions repeated daily produced noticeable shifts over time. Progress wasn't dramatic, it was dependable. Belief sustained this consistency, ensuring motivation remained steady rather than sporadic. There were times when progress felt invisible. No immediate results. No obvious confirmation. In these moments, belief became most important. It reminded him that unseen growth was still growth. Roots strengthened before branches appeared. He practiced forgiveness not just toward others, but toward himself. Past missteps were acknowledged, without prolonged self-criticism. This release lightened emotional load. Belief reframed forgiveness as forward movement rather than forgetting. He paid attention to how intention influenced outcome. Actions driven by clarity felt lighter, even when challenging. Those driven by fear felt heavier, regardless of success. Belief guided intention, ensuring effort originated from alignment. He allowed joy to exist without justification. Happiness no longer required achievement. Simple moments, shared laughter, quiet satisfaction, internal peace were enough. Belief validated this joy, protecting it from guilt. Reflection evolved into anticipation. Instead of only looking back, he considered how present choices shaped future ease. Long-term thinking no longer felt overwhelming. Belief connected present discipline to future freedom. He became comfortable with not knowing everything. Curiosity replaced control. Questions became tools rather than threats. Belief supported this openness, encouraging growth through inquiry. Physical routines stabilized. Movement became intentional, rather than obligatory. Rest was respected. Nutrition was mindful. These practices reinforced well-being. Belief linked physical care to mental clarity. He noticed how alignment reduced internal conflict. Decisions felt cleaner. Doubt diminished. This coherence created momentum. Belief sustained this harmony, preventing fragmentation. As he moved forward, he accepted that growth was ongoing. There was no final version to reach. Becoming was continuous. Belief embraced this continuity, ensuring motivation remained alive. With each passing day, belief no longer needed reinforcement. It existed quietly, integrated into thought, action, and response. It shaped how he met challenges, celebrated progress, and navigated uncertainty, not as an answer, but as a companion. And so he continued, adaptable, grounded, not chasing certainty, not resisting change, simply engaging fully, trusting that participation itself carried meaning. Belief walked with him here, steady and unobtrusive, guiding each step without demand. Momentum didn't announce itself. It revealed itself through continuity. The rhythm he had built now carried him forward, even on days when motivation felt quiet. There was a subtle reassurance in knowing that progress didn't rely on emotion anymore. Action followed commitment, not mood. This shift created stability that felt almost effortless. He realized discipline had transformed. It was no longer rigid or punishing. It had softened into routine, something reliable rather than restrictive. The structure he once resisted now supported him, freeing mental space instead of occupying it. Belief reframed discipline as care rather than control. Time perception changed as well. Days no longer blurred into urgency. Moments stretched just enough to be noticed. He stopped rushing toward completion and began valuing engagement. Tasks felt lighter when attention replaced haste. Belief reinforced this presence, reminding him that quality often mattered more than speed. He became attuned to internal signals. Fatigue was respected, not overridden. Inspiration was welcomed, not forced. By listening rather than pushing, he preserved energy. Belief validated this responsiveness, allowing balance to replace burnout. Confidence matured. It no longer sought proof. It didn't need comparison. It existed quietly, rooted in consistency rather than performance. When challenges arose, confidence didn't eliminate difficulty. It reduced intimidation. Belief sustained this grounded confidence, preventing it from tipping into arrogance. Communication evolved again. Words were chosen carefully, not cautiously, but intentionally. He spoke less, listened more, and when he did speak, clarity guided expression. Conversations felt more meaningful because they weren't rushed toward conclusions. Belief encouraged understanding over winning. He noticed how patience altered outcomes. Waiting no longer felt passive. It became an active choice to allow timing its role. Situations resolved themselves differently when not forced. Belief supported this patience, easing the urge to intervene prematurely. Adaptability strengthened. Change no longer disrupted identity. Instead, identity adjusted fluidly. Plans shifted without panic. Expectations softened without disappointment. Belief framed adaptability as intelligence rather than compromise. Learning deepened through experience. Lessons absorbed through action lingered longer than those learned theoretically. Mistakes became instructors rather than verdicts. Belief transformed failure into feedback, ensuring resilience replaced discouragement. He examined ambition honestly. Goals still mattered, but they no longer defined worth. Achievement became expression, not validation. Belief protected this distinction, allowing ambition to inspire rather than pressure. There were moments of stillness that felt profoundly complete. Nothing needed fixing. Nothing demanded improvement. Being was enough. These moments didn't halt growth, they nourished it. Belief honored this stillness, recognizing rest as progress. He refined boundaries gently, not as walls, but as guidelines. Boundaries preserved focus and protected values. They clarified priorities without isolating connection. Belief reinforced this clarity, ensuring boundaries served alignment, not avoidance. Reflection shifted forward again. He assessed direction without judgment. Adjustments were made without self-criticism. Belief supported this neutrality, allowing course correction without emotional weight. Gratitude expanded beyond circumstances. It included effort, learning, even struggle. Appreciation no longer depended on ease. Belief reframed gratitude as recognition rather than reward. Creativity resurfaced unpredictably. Ideas emerged during mundane moments. Solutions appeared, while attention was relaxed. Belief trusted this process, allowing inspiration space, rather than chasing it aggressively. He practiced acceptance, without resignation. Reality was acknowledged honestly, without resistance. From that acceptance, action flowed more effectively. Belief grounded this realism, ensuring optimism remained practical. Connection with others felt cleaner. Expectations diminished. Presence increased. Relationships thrived on authenticity rather than obligation. Belief encouraged this authenticity, reducing performative interaction. He noticed how intention subtly influenced environment. Calm invited calm. Focus invited clarity. This reciprocity reinforced responsibility over reaction. Belief strengthened awareness of this influence. Challenges still appeared, but they felt proportionate. Problems no longer overshadowed capacity. He trusted his ability to respond thoughtfully. Belief sustained this trust, preventing escalation into overwhelm. Consistency continued quietly. Small commitments honored daily compounded into noticeable transformation. Belief reminded him that reliability often mattered more than intensity. He recognized how alignment simplified decisions. When values guided choices, complexity reduced. Doubt faded quicker. Belief maintained this alignment, preventing distraction. Self-respect deepened, not as pride, but as care. Choices reflected long-term well-being rather than short-term comfort. Belief supported this respect, framing self-care as responsibility. He allowed curiosity to lead exploration. Questions replaced assumptions. Discovery replaced defense. Belief nurtured this openness, ensuring growth remained dynamic. Moments of joy surfaced unexpectedly. Laughter arrived without cause. Contentment settled quietly. Belief protected these moments from skepticism, allowing joy to exist freely. He acknowledged impermanence calmly. Change was inevitable, but not threatening. Belief embraced impermanence as movement rather than loss. As progress continued, he stopped measuring distance traveled. Direction mattered more than position. Belief sustained forward motion without fixation. He trusted process deeply now, not blindly, but experientially. Evidence accumulated through lived consistency. Belief rested comfortably within this trust. And so the journey continued, steady, adaptable, intentional. No dramatic turning point. No final arrival. Just ongoing participation in becoming. Belief remained present, not loud, not demanding, simply reliable. The momentum he had built no longer depended on external reassurance. By now, the process itself had become proof. Each day added a quiet layer of confidence, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the steady kind that holds firm under pressure. He realized that consistency had reshaped his identity more effectively than motivation ever could. What once required effort now felt natural, and what once felt uncertain now felt familiar. This transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened inevitably. Through repetition and awareness working together, his sense of responsibility deepened. He stopped blaming circumstances and started owning outcomes fully, even when results weren't ideal. This ownership gave him control, not power over everything, but power over response, which mattered far more. Instead of waiting for conditions to improve, he learned to improve within conditions. This shift removed helplessness from the equation and replaced it with agency. Every situation became workable, even if it wasn't comfortable. Mental resilience became more refined. Stress still appeared, but it didn't linger. He learned how to process pressure without absorbing it. Thoughts moved through him instead of sticking. This mental agility allowed him to remain effective, even in demanding situations. Emotional regulation wasn't about suppression. It was about understanding. By naming emotions honestly, he prevented them from silently influencing decisions. He noticed how patience had grown into a strength. Earlier, waiting felt frustrating, like wasted time, but now patience carried intention. He trusted timing more than urgency. This trust allowed him to make decisions with clarity, rather than impulse. When action was required, he acted decisively. When waiting was wiser, he waited without agitation. This balance protected progress from self-sabotage. His standards evolved as well. He no longer measured success by comparison. External benchmarks lost their grip. Instead, he measured growth against past versions of himself. This internal metric created sustainable motivation. Improvement felt personal and meaningful rather than competitive. Each step forward mattered, regardless of how it looked to others. Focus sharpened significantly. Distractions lost their appeal as clarity increased. He became intentional about where attention flowed, understanding that attention shaped reality. By protecting focus, he protected outcomes. This discipline wasn't restrictive, it was liberating. Fewer distractions meant deeper engagement, and deeper engagement produced better results with less exhaustion. He became more selective with commitments. Not everything deserved a yes. He learned that overcommitment diluted quality. By choosing fewer priorities, he gave them fuller presence. This selectivity didn't limit opportunities, it enhanced them. What he pursued well. What he declined without regret. Reflection turned into a habit rather than an event. He regularly reviewed actions, decisions, and outcomes, not to criticize, but to refine. This feedback loop accelerated learning. Mistakes became adjustments instead of setbacks. Reflection grounded growth in reality, preventing repetition of avoidable errors. His emotional awareness expanded beyond himself. Empathy sharpened as judgment softened. He understood that everyone carried unseen weight. This awareness influenced interactions, making them more thoughtful and patient. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about control, but understanding. Influence grew naturally, through respect rather than authority. Confidence stabilized further. It no longer fluctuated based on success or failure. Self-trust became constant. This steadiness created emotional independence. He stopped outsourcing confidence to outcomes. Instead, it came from alignment between values and actions. As long as that alignment remained intact, confidence remained untouched. He embraced discomfort as a signal rather than a threat. Growth zones were rarely comfortable, but they were always informative. Discomfort indicated expansion. By leaning into it rather than avoiding it, he accelerated development. Fear lost its power once it was understood as temporary. Time management matured into energy management. He learned that productivity wasn't about doing more, but about doing what mattered when energy was highest. He scheduled demanding tasks during peak focus and allowed rest without guilt. This approach increased efficiency while preserving well-being. Creativity continued to surface in unexpected ways. Ideas connected naturally, without force. This flow came from mental space, created by clarity and balance. He trusted intuition more, recognizing it as accumulated experience rather than randomness. Decisions became quicker without becoming careless. Boundaries grew stronger and more defined. He protected his mental space with intention. Toxic influences lost access. This protection wasn't isolation, it was filtration. Only what aligned entered his environment. This clarity preserved peace and focus simultaneously. He stopped chasing validation. Approval became irrelevant to direction. Internal standards replaced external applause. This independence strengthened resolve. When praise arrived, it was appreciated but not required. When criticism appeared, it was evaluated without defensiveness. Gratitude deepened into perspective. Even difficult experiences were appreciated for their lessons. Gratitude didn't ignore hardship, it reframed it. This mindset prevented bitterness and encouraged resilience. Every phase served a purpose, even those that felt slow or heavy. Adaptation remained seamless. Plans shifted without frustration. Change no longer threatened stability, because identity wasn't tied to outcomes. Flexibility became a strength rather than a compromise. Movement continued, regardless of direction shifts. Self-awareness reached a new level. He recognized patterns before they repeated. Triggers lost their power once identified. This awareness reduced emotional reactions and increased intentional responses. Growth became proactive instead of reactive. He accepted imperfection fully. Perfectionism loosened its grip. Progress mattered more than flawlessness. This acceptance reduced pressure and increased consistency. Work improved because fear of error disappeared. Purpose remained clear but flexible. Direction stayed intact even as details evolved. This clarity prevented distraction while allowing adaptation. Vision guided action without limiting creativity. The journey continued quietly, steadily, without urgency. Growth no longer needed announcement. It unfolded through daily alignment, consistent effort, and patient belief. There was no finish line, only refinement. And within that refinement, he found fulfillment. The rhythm of his days had settled into something both deliberate and fluid. He no longer rushed through moments just to reach outcomes, nor did he linger aimlessly. There was intention behind movement, and ease within intention. He understood now that mastery was not about intensity alone, but about sustainability. Burnout had once disguised itself as ambition, but now ambition wore patience instead. He learned how to pace himself without losing momentum, how to move forward without grinding himself down. His inner dialogue solved him. Where there had once been harsh self-criticism, there was now constructive honesty. He addressed shortcomings without attaching identity to them. Failure became information, not condemnation. This change transformed the way he learned. Instead of resisting mistakes, he welcomed the insight they carried. Each error refined him. Each correction strengthened his approach. Learning accelerated because fear no longer blocked understanding. He noticed how calm had become his default state. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of clarity. Even when situations were demanding, his mind remained ordered. Chaos outside no longer translated into chaos within. This calm allowed him to see patterns others missed, to anticipate rather than react. Decisions became cleaner, more precise, because they weren't clouded by emotional noise. His confidence matured further. It was no longer something he needed to summon. It was something that simply existed. He trusted his preparation, his judgment, and his capacity to adjust when needed. This trust removed hesitation. When opportunities appeared, he didn't overthink whether he deserved them. He engaged fully, knowing that growth happens through participation, not perfection. Discipline had evolved as well. It wasn't rigid or punishing. It was adaptive. He understood when to push and when to pause. Rest was no longer viewed as weakness, but as strategy. By respecting recovery, he preserved long-term effectiveness. Energy cycles were honored instead of ignored. This awareness extended his capacity rather than draining it. His perspective on time shifted again. He stopped seeing it as something slipping away and started seeing it as something to be shaped. Presence mattered more than speed. A single focused hour now outweighed days of distracted effort. This realization sharpened his priorities. He became ruthless with distractions, not out of restriction, but out of respect for his own goals. Relationships reflected this growth. Communication became clearer, more intentional. He listened fully, instead of preparing responses. This presence deepened connections. Misunderstandings reduced because assumptions were replaced with curiosity. He expressed boundaries without aggression and expectations without entitlement. Mutual respect grew naturally from this clarity. He recognized how much strength existed in adaptability. Plans were important, but attachment to plans was limiting. When circumstances shifted, he adjusted without losing direction. This flexibility prevented stagnation. Growth continued even when routes changed. Progress became about direction, not method. His sense of purpose stabilized. It no longer depended on external milestones. Purpose was embedded in the process itself. Every action aligned with a larger vision, even when results were not immediately visible. This alignment created quiet satisfaction. Fulfillment came from knowing he was moving correctly, even when movement felt slow. He became more discerning about information intake. Not every opinion deserved attention. Not every trend deserved adoption. He filtered input through values and relevance. This filtration protected clarity. Noise reduced, signal strengthened. His thinking sharpened because it wasn't constantly interrupted. Creativity expanded further. Ideas emerged during stillness rather than force. He allowed space for thought to unfold. This space produced depth. Solutions became more elegant because they were not rushed. He trusted incubation as much as execution. Fear continued to appear, but it no longer dictated behavior. He acknowledged it without obedience. Fear became a signal to prepare, not a command to retreat. By acting alongside fear rather than waiting for it to disappear, he reclaimed momentum. Courage became practiced, not dramatic. Consistency remained his strongest advantage. Motivation fluctuated, but systems held. He relied on structure rather than emotion. This reliability produced results that compounded quietly. Over time, the accumulation became undeniable. Small daily actions created disproportionate outcomes. He refined his self-image. Identity was no longer based on roles or labels. It was based on principles. This made him resilient to change. Even when circumstances shifted, identity remained intact. This stability allowed experimentation without existential risk. His patience deepened even more. He accepted that some outcomes require time regardless of effort. This acceptance removed frustration. He invested fully while releasing control over timing. Trust replaced tension. This trust kept him grounded during delays. Reflection continued to guide refinement. He reviewed progress honestly, without exaggeration or dismissal. Wins were acknowledged, weaknesses addressed. This balance prevented complacency and burnout simultaneously. Growth stayed intentional. He noticed how gratitude now influenced action. Appreciation wasn't passive. It fueled responsibility. Being grateful for opportunity meant honoring it with effort. This mindset elevated performance without pressure. He became increasingly comfortable with silence. Silence provided clarity. It allowed thoughts to settle and priorities to surface. In silence, intuition spoke clearly. He listened more often now. Momentum carried forward naturally. There was no rush to arrive, no anxiety about distance left. The journey itself had become meaningful. Each phase built upon the last. creating coherence. Growth felt integrated rather than fragmented. He accepted uncertainty as permanent. Certainty was no longer required for action. He moved forward with incomplete information, trusting his ability to adjust. This adaptability reduced hesitation. Progress accelerated through motion. Self-respect anchored everything. Choices aligned with values even when inconvenient. This alignment created internal peace. No success felt hollow because integrity remained intact. He understood now that mastery is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows in composure, consistency, and clarity. It shows in how one responds under pressure and persists without recognition. The process continued, not as a struggle, but as a commitment. Each day reinforced the last. Growth was no longer something he chased. It was something he lived. His awareness had expanded beyond personal growth into something quieter and more grounded. He no longer measured progress by how far he had come compared to others, but by how consistently he remained aligned with himself. Comparison had lost its grip. Instead of draining energy, his focus stayed inward, refining execution, improving understanding, and strengthening resilience. This internal orientation gave him stability that external validation never could. He began noticing how even difficult moments carried value when approached correctly. Discomfort was no longer a warning sign, but an indicator of expansion. Whenever resistance surfaced, he examined it rather than escaping it. Often, resistance pointed directly toward the skill or insight he needed most. By leaning into it thoughtfully, he dissolved its power. Growth stopped feeling like force and started feeling like cooperation with reality. His emotional intelligence deepened significantly. He recognized emotions as information, not instructions. Instead of reacting impulsively, he paused, interpreted, and then responded deliberately. This ability transformed interactions. Conflicts became discussions. Misunderstandings became opportunities for clarity. And tension dissolved faster because ego no longer dominated conversations. He learned that calm presence often communicates more than words. His relationship with uncertainty matured further. Not knowing no longer created anxiety. It created curiosity. He stopped demanding immediate answers from life and instead focused on asking better questions. This shift made exploration enjoyable rather than stressful. Progress unfolded organically, guided by curiosity instead of pressure. He became increasingly selective with commitments. Every yes was examined for alignment, not excitement alone. This selectivity protected energy and preserved focus. Fewer commitments resulted in higher quality execution. He understood now that excellence requires boundaries. Saying no became an act of respect for both himself and others. His patience was tested repeatedly, yet it held. Delays no longer felt like obstacles, but like calibration periods. He used waiting time to refine skills, adjust strategy, and deepen understanding. Instead of stagnating during pauses, he prepared when movement resumed. He was sharper and more capable than before. He noticed how self-trust had become automatic. Decisions no longer required endless validation. He gathered information, reflected briefly, and then acted. Even when outcomes were imperfect, regret was minimal because effort and intention were sound. This trust created momentum. Forward motion replaced hesitation. Discipline continued evolving into something elegant. It no longer relied on rigid schedules or forceful routines. Instead, it adapted to circumstances while maintaining standards. He understood that consistency did not require sameness. Adjustments were allowed as long as direction remained intact. This flexibility prevented burnout and preserved enthusiasm. His creative thinking reached new depth. Ideas connected across disciplines. Solutions became multidimensional rather than linear. He stopped forcing originality and started cultivating awareness. Inspiration emerged naturally through observation, reflection, and synthesis. Creativity felt less like effort and more like clarity, revealing itself. He grew comfortable with long-term thinking. Immediate gratification lost its appeal. He valued outcomes that compounded slowly but reliably. This perspective influenced every choice. Short-term discomfort was acceptable if it served long-term stability. He measured success by durability rather than speed. Relationships continued, benefiting from this maturity. He showed up more present, more honest, and less defensive. Listening became instinctive. Empathy was practiced without self-sacrifice. Boundaries remained firm yet kind. Trust deepened because interactions were no longer transactional. They were intentional. He recognized the importance of environment. Physical and mental spaces were curated deliberately. Clutter was reduced. Noise was minimized. Surroundings began supporting focus instead of competing for attention. This environmental alignment enhanced performance without additional effort. Self-awareness sharpened further. He noticed patterns in energy, motivation, and attention. By understanding these rhythms, he planned effectively. High-focus tasks were matched with peak energy, and recovery followed exertion naturally. This rhythm maximized output while preserving well-being. He stopped resisting repetition. Repetition was no longer boring. It was mastery in motion. Each iteration revealed nuance. Each cycle refined precision. What once seemed monotonous now felt meditative. Depth replaced novelty as the primary source of engagement. Fear still appeared occasionally, but it had become predictable and manageable. He acknowledged it calmly and continued forward anyway. Courage was no longer dramatic, it was routine. This normalization removed fear's intensity. What remained was respect for risk, not avoidance. He became increasingly grounded in values. Decisions aligned with principles even when inconvenient. This alignment created internal consistency. There was no fragmentation between belief and action. This coherence generated quiet confidence that did not depend on recognition. Reflection remained a daily practice. He reviewed actions honestly, without distortion. Adjustments were made quickly. Learning loops shortened. Improvement accelerated because feedback was welcomed rather than resisted. Gratitude continued influencing behavior. Appreciation translated into responsibility. Opportunities were honored through effort, not entitlement. This mindset sustained motivation even during difficult phases. He developed tolerance for solitude. Time alone was no longer avoided. It became essential. Solitude clarified thought and restored energy. In quiet moments, insights surfaced effortlessly. Decisions became clearer after stillness. He accepted that mastery has no final destination. There was no moment of completion, only ongoing refinement. This acceptance removed urgency. He stopped chasing finish lines and focused on quality of movement. Progress became sustainable because it was no longer rushed. He understood now that growth does not always look impressive. Often, it is invisible, internal, and gradual. But over time, these subtle changes compound into undeniable transformation. He trusted this process completely. The sense of pressure that once fueled him had dissolved. What remained was commitment. Commitment without anxiety. Effort without desperation. Ambition without self-destruction. This balance made progress enjoyable rather than exhausting. He moved forward steadily, not because he was chasing something, but because moving forward felt natural. Growth had become integrated into identity. There was no separation between who he was and what he was building. The journey continued, grounded and intentional. Each day reinforced clarity. Each choice strengthened alignment. The path ahead remained open, not intimidating. Whatever remained would be handled with the same presence, patience, and precision that had carried him this far. As the first rays of dawn began to touch the snowy streets of Grand Rapids, Michigan, the Maine boy stood quietly outside his house. The Polar Express slowly retreating into the distance. The night's adventure had ended, but the magic lingered in the crisp winter air. The train's soft whistle faded, leaving behind only the quiet whisper of the snow falling gently around him. The boy clutched the small silver bell Santa had given him, feeling its delicate weight and listening to the faint chime that only he could hear. It was a private treasure, a reminder of the extraordinary journey he had just experienced, a journey that had stretched beyond the ordinary and had shown him the incredible power of belief. He paused for a moment, gazing at the familiar neighborhood now bathed in morning light. Everything seemed ordinary, yet the contrast between the mundane world and the wonders of the Polar Express made each detail of his surroundings feel charged with possibility. He imagined the elves bustling at the North Pole, the workshops full of activity, and Santa preparing his sleigh for the journey that lay ahead. Each memory from the night, whether the children laughing together, the girl who shared her hot chocolate, or the quiet wisdom of the hobo who had guided him, resonated vividly, filling him with a sense of awe and gratitude. Although the journey had ended, its lessons and magic were now part of him, shaping his perception of the world and igniting a spark that would endure far beyond that single night. Stepping into the house, the boy found his family stirring, preparing for Christmas morning. The smells of breakfast and the warmth of familiar routines created a comforting contrast to the excitement and wonder of the Polar Express. He smiled quietly, knowing that the true magic of the journey did not lie only in what he had seen, but in the understanding it had brought him the realization that belief, courage, and kindness were forces capable of shaping reality in subtle but profound ways. The bell rested in his hand, its chime faint yet unmistakable, echoing the truth of a world that only those who truly believed could perceive. The boy's younger sister, Sarah, noticed him holding the bell and looked at him curiously. Though he could not explain the full truth of the Polar Express, he could share the sense of wonder and the lessons he had learned. He handed her the bell carefully, allowing her to feel its smooth surface and the potential it represented. For Sarah, as for him, it became a symbol of possibility, tangible reminder that extraordinary experiences could exist, even in a world that often seemed ordinary. They listened together, imagining its faint chime, knowing that magic existed where belief and imagination were allowed to flourish. Throughout the morning, the boy reflected on the adventure, the daring climbs across the train cars, the near misses with the frozen lakes, the guidance of the hobo, and the North Pole with its bustling elves and gleaming workshops. Each memory was vivid, yet he realized that the true magic was not simply in witnessing extraordinary events, but in how they had changed him. Courage had been discovered in moments of fear, empathy in moments of challenge, and the wonder of belief in moments that demanded trust in the unseen. The lessons of the Polar Express had become intertwined with his understanding of the world, shaping his character and his perspective on life in ways both profound and lasting. Later that day, as he observed the neighborhood glistening under the winter sun, the boy felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that magic was not confined to the extraordinary night alone. It was present in the choices he made, the kindness he showed to others, and the belief he held quietly within himself. Every action, every thought, every moment of courage or imagination was connected to the lessons of the train, echoing through the ordinary world in subtle ways. This understanding allowed him to participate fully in the joys of Christmas morning, decorating the tree, sharing laughter, exchanging gifts while carrying the extraordinary with him in his heart. That evening, the boy stepped outside once more, the stars twinkling above like distant lights guiding the way to endless possibilities. Holding the bell close, he thought of the chorus of voices at the North Pole, the elves' cheerful chatter, and the radiant figure of Santa Claus as he prepared for his journey. Each memory reinforced the understanding that the Polar Express was more than a train. It was a bridge to a world of imagination, courage, and belief. Its lessons would remain with him, shaping his actions, his hopes, and his understanding of what it truly meant to believe in something greater than oneself. As bedtime approached, the boy placed the bell carefully on his nightstand. Its chime, though faint, seemed to fill the room with a quiet energy, a soft reminder of the adventure that had transformed him. That night, he dreamed of the train rolling across snowy landscapes, of the laughter and camaraderie of the other children, and of the breathtaking spectacle of the North Pole, even in sleep. The journey continued in his imagination, reinforcing the lessons of courage, empathy, and faith that had been imparted throughout the night. The extraordinary adventure now lived inside him, inseparable from his daily life and his understanding of the world. Years passed, and the boy grew into a man, yet the bell remained with him, a cherished artifact of belief and wonder. Each time he heard its faint chime, he remembered the journey, the daring climbs, the quiet moments of reflection, the friendships formed, and the magical world of the North Pole. The memory never faded. It remained alive within him, a symbol of courage, kindness, and the endless possibilities that belief could unlock. The Polar Express had given him a gift that extended beyond Christmas, beyond the train, and beyond the physical world. The understanding that magic exists wherever one chooses to see it, and where one believes in the unseen. On each subsequent Christmas morning, the bell's chime reminded him that magic was not reserved for grand adventures or far-off places, but was present in the small, everyday moments of life. Its music, though inaudible to others, resonated deeply within him, affirming the enduring power of imagination, courage, and hope. The Polar Express had returned him safely to the familiar, yet it had also opened his heart to the extraordinary, leaving him with the knowledge that wonder and belief could exist anywhere, at any time, for anyone willing to embrace them. And so, the boy, now grown, kept the bell close, listened to its gentle chime, and remembered the night that had forever changed him. The Polar Express continued its journey beyond the horizon, carrying children and believers to the North Pole, where lessons of courage, faith, and friendship awaited those ready to trust in the unseen. Though he might never board the train again, its magic remained alive within him, shaping his view of the world and his understanding of the power of belief. For him, the adventure had ended, but its lessons endured, an eternal echo of wonder, courage, and the joy of believing in the impossible. And so, with the bell in his hand and belief in his heart, he entered each day with the knowledge that magic, once discovered, never truly leaves. It becomes part of the soul, a quiet guide through life's challenges and adventures, a reminder that extraordinary experiences can be found even in the ordinary, and that the greatest gift of all is the ability to believe. The Polar Express had given him more than a ride to the North Pole. It had given him a lifelong understanding of hope, courage, and the enduring power of belief.